So let me tell you a story. This one is about King Midas. He was the king of this kingdom from long ago called Phrygia. Actually, the story of how he became the king of Phrygia is a bit funny, to be honest. So basically, the kingdom of Phrygia had no kings for the past few years, at least, and the people were getting kind of concerned, so they go to an oracle. An oracle is this priestess that is essentially a link between the gods and the mortals, and they tell the mortals about their fates and such, but they do it in such a convoluted way with riddles and poetry that it can get really confusing. But the people were desperate, so they go to this oracle and they ask the oracle who should become the next king of Phrygia. And the oracle tells them that the next man that would drive a cart through the main city gate would become their new king. Simple, right? And not long afterwards, a man does pass through the gate with his cart. His name was Gordius. He was a poor farmer that came into Phrygia along with his wife and son, and the people of Phrygia looked at Gordius and went, "Him. We want him to be our new king." And so Gordius becomes the king of Phrygia. And after he passes, his son Midas becomes the king. So even though Midas was born poor, he was raised in royalty with love and sense of duty as he was going to be the next heir to the throne, and he excelled in his role. He was known to be kind and compassionate to his people, beloved by everyone in the land. So by the time he became the king, he had everything a king could ask for. He had peace in the kingdom, prosperity for his people, wealth beyond compare, loved by his family. He lived in this great castle and was essentially very abundant in his life. But to him, though, none of it actually brought him any joy. He just seemed to want more and more of the gold and wealth. So even though his life felt fulfilled, he didn't exactly feel abundant or satisfied. During such a time, on one fine day, when the birds were chirping, the gentle breeze was flowing through the valley, making the trees sway gently as if they were dancing with the wind, and there was only rarely a cloud in the sky during the bright morning. It was during such a day that Dionysus, the Greek god of wine, partying, theater, and all the fun stuff, he was going through the kingdom of Phrygia. He was traveling with an entourage, and among his entourage was possibly one of the most important of them all to him, and that was Silenus. You see, Silenus was a satyr, a half-goat, half-human mythical creature. Normally, satyrs are like Greek woodland gods. They love music and dancing and basically going after beautiful woodland nymphs. But to Dionysus, even though he was actually the son of Zeus from one of his many affairs, Dionysus grew up with Silenus, essentially as his foster son. So during their journey through Phrygia, it was said that Silenus got so drunk that he basically wanders off, enjoying the nature, and the lovely weather only made it so pleasant for him to the point that he did not notice that he was basically separated from Dionysus and his group. But he was drunk, so he didn't care. He continues to enjoy the nature until he comes across this rose field. And in his drunken state, he sees this rose bush and essentially just falls asleep. He didn't know that the rose garden belonged to King Midas. Not that I think he would actually care even if he did know. But at the time that Silenus fell asleep on the rose garden, King Midas went on his daily walks, enjoying the nature far away from his responsibilities as the ruler of the kingdom, and he spots a dark blob in the rose bushes. So he gets curious and goes to inspect it and sees a satyr. Now, any normal person would have mistaken the satyr to be just any woodland creature, but King Midas knew exactly who he was. He knew of Silenus and Dionysus, and he recognized Silenus immediately. So he takes the completely drunk off his mind Silenus back to his castle, letting him sober up, and takes care of Silenus for 10 days and 10 nights, essentially until Silenus feels better. All this time, though, Dionysus is out of his mind. He's searching everywhere for Silenus. Honestly, it was kind of infuriating. He took one moment to just rest from their journey, just one moment to relax, and Silenus just is gone, just wandered off. Truly child behavior, to be honest. That's what Dionysus thinks. He searches far and wide, and in his inquiries comes to know that Silenus is being taken care of by the king himself. So he breathes a sigh of relief, shakes his head frustrated, and then heads straight for the castle to get Silenus back. But when he gets there, he sees how well King Midas has been taking care of his foster father and thanks him for the kindness. And in return for the hospitality, he grants King Midas one wish. Any wish that the king wanted would be his. Midas thinks for a moment. He has everything he's ever needed: the family, love, power, everything. What he doesn't have is exactly what he wanted, and that was gold. Maybe he could ask for that. So he wishes, I hope everything I touch becomes gold. Dionysus is taken aback, completely surprised. He was now wondering if he was the drunk one or if the king was the drunk one. Because who in their right mind would ask for such a wish? So he begins to wonder if the king actually thought the wish through. So before he grants it, he asks Midas, are you sure? Are you sure? This is exactly what you want. But Midas is adamant. He says again, I hope everything I touch becomes gold. Dionysus warns him, just think well before you ask for something. But Midas is steadfast. He is positive. So what else can Dionysus do? He had already promised Midas that anything that he would wish for would be granted. So a bit warily, he grants Midas' wish. And he says, starting from the following day, everything that Midas touches will turn to gold. After that, Dionysus and Silenus part, and they bid Midas farewell. Midas is excited though. He cannot wait for the next day to come any sooner. But when it finally does come, he wakes up bright and early the next morning. He is thrilled. He had exactly what he wanted. And now it's time to test it out. He reaches over to the small table that is beside his bed, and the moment his hand touches the table, it turns into gold. Oh, he is ecstatic now. He is running around the castle, going everywhere in every direction, touching every object that he could get his hands on, and every single one of them turned to gold. He was positively excited, but also exhausted. He was basically running around the entire day trying to see what objects he could turn into gold. And he didn't even take a moment to rest. So when he was finally tired and hungry, he goes to the large dining room and sits down. The food hasn't been served just yet, so he rests in the chair. He gazes at the roses in the vase in the middle of the table and reaches out to take one of them. But the moment his hand touches the flower, it's gold. He's a bit taken aback, shocked, a little bewildered. That wasn't supposed to happen. So he sits back in his chair, shakes his head and shrugs. Maybe he'll just have to admire them from afar from now on. And when the food finally comes in and is placed in front of him, he picks up one of the grapes, but then again, the grape turns into gold. The second he touches it, his shock is now slowly morphing into panic. He could feel his heart beating faster, his breath becoming shallower. He didn't think this wish applied to food as well. How was he going to survive? No. There had to be a mistake. So he grabs onto the bread beside, and that turns into gold as well. The juice on the side? No, that's gold. He's panicking now, completely, borderline terrified. He stands up from his chair, knocking it a bit forcefully with all the sudden movement. He's looking at all the golden food in front of him. This was not what he wanted. This was not what he wished for. He remembered his wish again. I hope everything I touch becomes gold. And Dionysus granted it to him. He was still completely in his thoughts, so much that he doesn't hear his daughter come into the dining room. She comes in to check on her father, but he's still zoned out. And he only notices his daughter just a tad bit too late. He tries to tell her not to come any closer, but he cannot form any words. His daughter holds onto his hand, and the moment her hand touches his, she turns into gold as well. Midas is horrified. This was his wish. I hope everything that I touch becomes gold. It didn't feel like a blessing anymore. He was completely devastated. He's crying, uncontrollably sobbing now. But there wasn't anyone that could come to comfort him. Not when they knew that they could themselves turn into gold. King Midas is now inconsolable. He had just lost his daughter. He cannot eat, he cannot drink, he cannot enjoy the things that had once brought him joy, even a tiny bit. So he cries. Loud, painful, gut-wrenching sobs that completely wreck him. And in his despair, he raises his hands and calls for Dionysus again, praying, begging for the god to reverse this curse. Dionysus hears him. He knew this was exactly what was going to happen. What kind of person would wish for everything that they touch to become gold? He knew that the king hadn't even thought it through when he made that wish. This would be his reckoning. But then the god remembered how the king took care of Silenus, the satyr that he considered to be his foster father. He felt his heart melt just a tiny bit, so he takes pity on the king. Dionysus answers. He tells King Midas that there is one way for him to get rid of the curse. And so, Midas, who is now completely defeated, he doesn't care for the gold anymore, he just wants his daughter back. And he just wants everything to go back to normal the way it was before, so he follows it to the T. He goes to the river Pactolus, just like Dionysus said, and he washes his hands in the river. And as he dips his hand in the water and rubs them, he sees these gold speckles flowing out of his hand and traveling away with the river current. It is said that King Midas's touch came back to normal after dipping them in the river, and when he went back to the castle, all the objects that turned gold because of his touch that day returned back to normal. Slowly, hope started to build within his chest. He runs through the castle, winding down the corridors, entering the dining room, where he watched, horrified, as his daughter turned into a golden statue after touching him. And to his relief, he finds that his daughter is back to being normal again. She was no longer a statue. And that was the story of how unchecked greed almost made King Midas lose everything that he had ever loved. You see, greed as an emotion has been vilified throughout the ages, with tales about how people should be wary of such emotion. Whether it be a desire for wealth or power, it was said to be destructive. Be careful of what you wish for. Don't fall into the trap of your desires. Tales like these have been told throughout history. They have evolved through the ages with different characters, different settings, but the core of it always remained the same. All with the core lesson of be happy with what you have. A lesson told so many times, so much that centuries later, there was one that relayed tales of the monkey's paw. You see, the monkey's paw is just a short story that was told in the early 20th century, several centuries after the first ever written myth of King Midas. It goes into the story of the White family that consists of Mr. and Mrs. White, the father and mother, and their son Herbert. And it goes to show how their lives have changed after receiving this monkey's paw. In the story, Mr. and Mrs. White live in this comfortable house with their son. One day, they have this family friend that comes over. His name is Morris. He's a major in the British Army and was previously stationed in India. During his visit, Major Morris is telling them these stories of his adventures in India, and he shows them this mummified monkey's paw and tells the family that this paw has magic infused into it by a fakir. You see, a fakir is a man of the Islamic religion that basically renounces all worldly possessions. Some are even said to have magical abilities, so Major Morris produces this monkey's paw and tells the family that this paw has magical abilities infused into it by a fakir. He says that the paw will grant anyone 3 wishes, but every wish that was granted would always come with a terrible consequence. He tells the family of his terrible experiences and chucks the paw into the fire, but before the paw could completely burn down, Mr. White saves it. And the minute that happens though, Mr. Morris has alarm bells going off in his head. Mr. White and the family, though, they seem to be under the spell of the paw. And he did not want anything to do with this, so he gives them a warning before he leaves. He says, beware of what would happen should you use the paw. But Mr. White, he's a skeptic, and he already has everything that he could ever want. What could he even wish for? He has a loving wife, a dutiful son, a roof over his head. Life was perfect, but at his son's urging, Mr. White makes one wish. He wishes for £200 to make a final mortgage payment on his house. Well, nothing happens immediately. There's no shining, sprinkling dust that surrounds them, no white glow that tells them that their wish has been granted. Everything seemed normal. More than normal, everything seemed as it previously was. So they just put the paw aside. It was already late in the night, so after cleaning up, the family just goes to sleep for the night and forgets about it. The next day, again, everything was normal. They wake up, have their breakfast, Herbert goes for work. Time goes on just as it did, as if it was any other day. Until late in the afternoon, there's a knock on the door. It was someone from Herbert's company. They look at Mr. and Mrs. White quietly, just a little pensive. I mean, what kind of person would actually want to give a family this kind of news? Finally, with a shaky breath and a sigh, the man informs Mr. and Mrs. White that their son, Herbert, met with an accident at work. His body had been mutilated. Mr. and Mrs. White are in shock. What do you mean their son is dead? He was just happily going to work just that morning. But before they could ask any questions, the representative holds out an envelope. And he tells them that the company denies any responsibility for the accident, but since he did die at work, they do have to pay bereavement to the family. He offers the Whites the envelope and leaves immediately. Once Mr. and Mrs. White are finally inside, they close the door, they break down. They lost their only child, their only son. And once they collect their thoughts, Mr. White opens the envelope and his hands shake as he reads it, because within the envelope was a bereavement payment that the company provided them, and the amount, £200. Again, this was another story that showed the destructive nature of greed. What's surprising to me is that in both these stories, yes, King Midas and the White family desired for more, but it seemed that their wishes weren't inherently hurting anyone. Both these stories are almost a cautionary tale that you have to be content with what you have. It seems that regardless of where you're from in the world, regardless of your background, throughout history, greed is condemned, frowned upon to the extent that people in the olden days feared it to be one of the most deadly sins. Folk tales in the Brothers Grimm of the fisherman and his wife, where the wife keeps wishing for greater and greater wealth and status to the point that they lose it all in the end. Or the children's story of the goose and the golden egg. Even the Christmas Carol. All stories that we tell children and repeat them almost every year so they would learn to be kind and considerate to the people around them, not letting the greed fuel them. Some ancient societies even saw this emotion as a driving source that could damage the fabric of society. So why is it that one emotion that humanity feared, the one that we knew would destroy us to this extent, why is it that we celebrate that greed in the modern day? To the point that there is a famous quote from the movie Wolf of Wall Street, where Michael Douglas states, "Greed, for the lack of a better word, is good. Greed is right. Greed works." Greed clarifies, cuts through, and captures the essence of the evolutionary spirit. Greed in all of its forms. Greed for life, for money, for love, knowledge has marked the upward surge of mankind. This emotion, it isn't exactly confined to humans either. It's seen in several animals too. Hoarding in food and resources, but it's for their survival. And us, as humans, We need those resources too. Except as humans, we have an additional caveat of needing money to gain those resources. And so we need that money for survival. To buy food, water, clothes, even putting a roof over our heads. And so we could consider this to be a resource for survival. And so we work for that wealth. And with that wealth, we slowly start to get a better standard of living. And then we get more wealth. And now people around us start to notice. And then we get more wealth. And now we're having to maintain what we showed the people around us. So when does this all stop? Let's just take the stories I've told you. For example, King Midas had all of this wealth and love that any person could ever ask for. And yet, he wasn't grateful for it, nor was he satisfied. I've just told you the tame version of the story. In another version, Dionysus does not tell Midas how to cure the curse, and Midas eventually dies of starvation. Even the white family with the monkey's paw, they had everything they could ever want, and yet they were not grateful for it either. But come to think of it, the emotion itself, it can't be that bad, no? Isn't it the same emotion that leads to our desire to strive for a better life? A person from a poor neighborhood striving to get a better education, a better job to make themselves financially stable enough that they don't have to worry about looking at the price of things that they have to buy. Or when an athlete that's just starting out looking at the Olympians and wishing, hoping, and striving to be there one day, receiving a gold medal in the Olympics. Or an indie musician hoping to win the Grammys. So maybe, just maybe, every emotion is good to have within reason. Maybe even greed. And maybe that emotion is best when combined with our efforts. And on our journey to achieving our goals, let's just keep our feet firmly planted on the ground and be grateful for the things that we already have. Because in the end, no matter how tall the tree grows, it would be nothing without its roots firmly planted in the ground. So, until next time, sweet dreams. Good night.